There's a little matter we need to talk about.
Yeah, money, right? Well, forget it.
No, not money. Gray's Sports Almanac.
You heard him, girls. Party's over. Start talking, kid. What else you know about that book?
First, you tell me how you got it. How, where, and when.
All right. Take a seat. Sit down! November 12th, 1955. That was when?
November 12th, 1955. That was the date I went back. That was the date of the famous Hill Valley lightning storm.
You know your history. Very good.
Do you expect me to talk?
Hello and welcome to episode 98 of Do You Expect Us to Talk? I'm your host Becca, and with me as always are my good time travelling buddies Chris and Dave. How are you doing?
Batter up!
I'll make a point about that statement in a minute. I never understood what that meant. But I've got it now, but I didn't get it at the time. Good evening.
What I might do is I might travel back in time and add a little precursor before the recording started to say, listeners, beware. Chris is going to yell something in your ear.
Well, no, it was batter up, right? It means
batter
the
up.
batter. Now, of course, when we call them batsmen over here in cricket. And the first time I ever heard it was Mel Gibson says it to Patsy Kensit in Lethal Weapon 2.
Oh, yeah.
And it stuck in my mind because I didn't know what it meant. And I thought, bat her up. That sounds violence towards women. And then I thought it meant batter up, as in the stuff you put on fish. Right? So that statement always confused me. But there you go.
No, but obviously in baseball, it's like batter up, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Batsmen, savages.
I always see it as like just how much Biff just seems out of his fucking mind. I mean, he plays it. I mean, he overplays it to such a degree.
He's crazy, like, isn't he? He's actually crazy.
That whole like, you know, Griff. Sorry, I should say.
Griff even. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. He's just
Griff.
so like. He's like sort of constantly in that kind of weird.
I want that as my text tone. Every time I get a text, it's going to go
over exaggerated kind of sort of. It's not even a growl. It's just like a. It's almost if like he's got mechanic. Oh, I suppose that might have been.
He has got some kind of mechanical implant. It's mentioned in the film.
Yeah, some screws loose.
Effectively, yeah.
Yeah. But anyway,
he has got Biff.
But which film is that, Becca?
It's time to travel back in time again.
I'm sensing terrible.
I'm back again.
I'm sensing terrible doubt with Becca tonight, you know, because when she announced who she was at the start, there was like a bit of a pause, like she wasn't sure.
Well, I wrote the introduction, and then I thought, no, this sounds rubbish, so I can't do this. So I just went ahead and did the usual introduction.
To be honest, when has quality control ever come into our thinking?
It comes into my thinking quite a lot.
Does it?
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to over-compliment you, but it doesn't show.
Well, we do our best to destroy
to undermine that. Yeah. To undermine it. So yes, we are reviewing Back to the Future Part 2, starring Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd, Lee Thompson, Elizabeth Shue, and Billy Zane, if you can spot him, and Clint Eastwood, if you can spot him.
Billy Zane, if you can
She's
spot him.
She's obsessed with Billy Zane.
I am.
And it'll always be if you can spot him. If we ever cover like Titanic, it'll be if you can spot him.
Well, he plays a main character in Titanic.
Of the film.
Well, Kate Winslet's other half, so you know.
We'll get
boyfriend.
Well, one day we'll get to like review like The Phantom, and it'll be like starring Billy Zane if you can spot him.
But he's a main character, so it won't be if you can spot him.
Did you notice that Becca was desperate to say the words Billy Zane and boyfriend in the same sentence?
He's a handsome man, isn't he? Really?
He is a handsome man.
I will know her. Very handsome chap.
Yeah.
Although I don't know what he looks like now. I don't know.
He looks like Billy Zane.
Probably the same, but older.
Yeah. I think the last thing I will have seen him in was Zoolander.
Likewise, actually. He did. I don't know if he still does, but he did do a column, like a self-help column in Empire, I think.
A self-help column.
Well, not the self-help, but kind of like Agony Aunt,
Really?
Agony Uncle column. Yeah, Google it. It's there. It's a thing.
That sounds like a really fucking dumb idea, but okay.
It was good fun. Anyway, the screenplay is Bob Gale, with a score by Alan Zemeckis and directed by... No, that's wrong. Alan Silvestri.
Alan
Zemeckis. They had a baby and merged.
Okay.
Scored by Alan Silvestri, directed by Robert Zemeckis, and released in 1989.
Jeez, that's like 4 years. I mean, they filmed this back to back with the third one, didn't they?
They did.
Yes,
Although, did any of you guys, when watching this, obviously because they go to 2015 and now that year has passed, did any of you kind of take a note of what they predicted and what's actually come true?
I think the point is they weren't really predicting. I mean, we'll get to it as we go into the film, but I mean the point. I think I'm trying to think which of them said it. I mean, when you talk about Bob and Bob, they're quite often interviewed together or talking on a commentary together. Well, not a commentary, but an interview that's used as a commentary. But they're also interviewed separately as well, and I can't remember which one of them said this, but certainly one of the Bobs said they never intended to go to the future because they never intended to make a sequel. No. And they said the problem with going to the future is you always get it wildly wrong. So we just felt that we needed to get there, make a load of jokes and get out. And that's effectively what they did. I don't think any prediction of the future would or should have flying cars in it, because that's just never going to happen. And you've only got to think about it for a moment to realise why. So I just think they got in, made it nice and colourful, made a load of jokes and got out. I'm trying to think if much of it did come to anything. Is there much from 2015 that actually made anything? I suppose the multi-channel TV in a regard.
Yeah. Pepsi Max, I think, became a thing, but obviously that was in about 10 years ago. They haven't got Pepsi Perfect yet.
I guess the thing I really wanted, right, and it's
was the two-tie fashion.
No.
Yeah, that never came in.
I think it's a sign of, A, how unfashionable I am, that it has nothing to do with clothes, and B, how lazy I am, because the whole idea of a hoverboard was, well, I don't like skateboards, so why would I want that? All I wanted was the rehydrator. I love the idea of going and buying a little teeny pizza, and then in seconds it being massive and hot.
That's really cool, isn't it? That's quite a cool idea.
I remember when I was seeing that, I thought it looked absolutely delicious. After reviewing it, after watching it now, it looks so gross. It looks so really bad. Would you want to eat it?
It looks sloppy, doesn't it? They actually
really messy, really sloppy.
Pizza Hut came in and built a kitchen on the set, and they were just making pizza after pizza for take after take. So basically, all of the cast and crew were just stuffing their faces with pizza all day.
Oh, delicious! They'll be off pizza for life, though.
Yeah, you'll be like, ugh. Just be
that might be the strangest sentence you've ever uttered on this show. Ooh, delicious! Put you off pizza for life, though. But which is it, Becca?
Well, it would. It'd be delicious up to a point. You'd think, oh yeah, pizza, and then after about a week, you'd go, oh, fuck off pizza, you know.
Yeah, I mean, we'll go into some of the technicality making of this film. I mean, I guess the one thing that sticks out that, we have a version of this. It doesn't look the same, but we have a version of this. I guess two things in the film that stick out to me. The multi-channel TV. Now, we don't tend to sit and watch 9 channels at the same time, but picture-in-picture and lots of different options. Yes, I guess that's happened after a fashion. I guess the other thing is, and it never gets mentioned when people say what we did and didn't get, is when he goes into the cafe, he doesn't order from a person, he orders from a machine, albeit it's doing an impression of Ronald Reagan or whatever.
You got Michael Jackson as well.
But we can beef or pork. But we can do that now. You can walk into certain McDonald's in service stations and stuff like that and just place your order by machine.
Who's the other guy he was contending with who tries to butt in?
That was the Ayatollah Khomeini.
What a random fucking choice.
Well, he would have been big news in 1989 because that was the year of the fatwa on Salman Rushdie. I paused then because I've just been watching Curb Your Enthusiasm and I nearly said Larry David because that's a plot point.
Larry David.
gets a fatwa put on him in that show. But
I need to catch up on Curb. I've only seen like the first few episodes.
I'm not going to go into it too much here, but the whole plot point of season 9 is he writes Fatwa the musical.
Oh yeah, I saw somebody else post about this on Facebook.
Yeah.
Fatwa the musical, yeah.
So, of course, he gets a fatwa put on him in the first episode. It's not the strongest season because it drifts to and from the point in a way that, say, the one when he made The Producers didn't. But, so the point is, though, 1989 was the year of the fatwa on Salman Rushdie. So Ayatollah Khomeini was like back in the news quite a lot as well that year. So it's him and Ronald Reagan. All sort of Max Headroom style.
Yeah.
Which again is the 80s, the point of the 80s with it.
What happened to Max Headroom?
I have no idea.
No.
What was the guy called? Matt something or other, wasn't he? Yeah, the actor who played him. But
It was a Sledgehammer.
big news for a while.
Sledgehammer.
Okay.
Fair enough.
That's what it reminds me of, Sledgehammer, the video.
It seems like I'm not the only one with a voice of an angel.
Yeah, you are.
I can't sing.
I can't.
Anyway, see, that's how you do it. That was beautiful, Chris.
When's your album coming out?
Never.
Oh.
Never.
So you need you to do a cover of Do You Know How Christmas Trees Are Growing?
Album, he'd be the sort of person that, like Farmer Bro Martin Shkreli, would pay $2 million and buy it and put it in a vault. It would be worth that much, and it would be also worth it to us to not hear it.
No.
Yes, the world just wouldn't be able to take it.
So anyway, this film, we got it in about November, so it had been out a fair time back in that era. This felt like forever. Now I know time travels a bit differently when you're younger; it's a bit sort of slower. But it did feel like an insanely delayed sequel.
Well, 4 years is a really long time.
It is a long time now, and it is a sign of the time.
When you're young, it is long.
It is a long time, but this is part of my point about things like Bond, that like 4 years isn't acceptable because it's a lifetime when you're a child, and I can pick on examples where it was a lifetime. And Back to the Future's chief amongst them. Now, of course... and it was less than 4 years for me because I don't think I certainly, as I said last week, didn't really see it immediately. But I remember the build-up to this. I remember its working title of Paradox, and actually you do see that on the sort of clapperboards and that during, behind-the-scenes stuff. I remember being really, really excited for it, but I wasn't expecting a sequel until one was on the way.
I remember seeing this rented on video when it first came out, and then I think I remember Back to the Future. Well, gets Back to the Future 3 like followed afterwards, but it was kind of funny because I think I watched this youngish. How old would I have been? 8.
Well, when it was released, you'd have been about 6. But if you didn't see it in cinemas and saw it on like video a year or two later, maybe 8, maybe 7 or 82. Hang on, sorry, I've got your year of birth wrong there. Sorry, you were 7 when it came out.
Yeah,
because you were born 82. So yeah,
82. Yeah, so it would have been.
I forgot you were the incumbent Batman.
Yes, that's not. Why do you think
you're Batman, aren't you?
Wait, why do you think I've been so busy all this time?
Damn it.
Joker keeps like fucking everything
Reminds
up.
me, he's 35. Batman's always 35. Chris is Batman this year.
Yeah, he's Batman. So.
Shh, quiet.
First
I want everybody to know.
First time crime. It's coincidentally the first year crime rates have gone up since the dawn of the
Oh, that's true.
So Chris is
Not doing your job properly, are you? Come on, sort it out.
So
Yeah, well, Becca,
it
it depends on what the class as crime rates. That includes all like amount of criminals being beaten up by
targets have shifted. Right.
Someone dressed
Oh,
as
what
a bat.
you're saying is you're doing a better job because it's actually vigilante beating stuff.
Vigilante beatings have gone up.
So, yeah, you see, so like, don't always believe what you read
I
in the
have
papers.
to say you misunderstood the term beatings.
Oh no.
Beatings. Yeah, but bless me at a young age, I always thought like when it actually finished that they just stopped watching it. I was like, no, keep on going. It's not finished yet. because of how it ends. It's kind of like, well, that's not an ending. Well, come on, keep going.
Yeah. I just I don't wish for a world where we didn't have the internet at all. I mean, you take the rough with the smooth, the way people talk to each other on social media and Twitter, and everyone's opinion being absolute now and nobody listening to each other. There's plenty about the internet I don't like. But, you know, stuff like this and us knowing each other, you know, it just wouldn't have been possible. I'd have been sat here now without the internet, epically fucking bored. So I'm glad it exists, but one of the things I miss is just the element of surprise, because Back to the Future 2 came out. I had no idea whether it was good, bad, or indifferent because I hadn't seen reviews, despite it having come out in May in America. I think it was May anyway. It could have been July. I get confused between that and 3 sometimes, but it came out in the summer there and we got it in the autumn anyway. So I went in not knowing. I mean, you get coming summer 1990 at the end. We had no idea. There was an audible gasp in the cinema. And you just think, you couldn't do that now. Yeah, they're modelled by Becca then.
Sharp intake of breath. But no, you couldn't do. You really couldn't do that. I mean, I think, you know, remember the days of the Bond films where it's like James Bond will return in insert name of film here, longest Bond film title ever. But I think now you do have to have that level of anticipation to build up interest, definitely, especially with the internet as well. You just simply can't do that. But I think it came as a complete shock to everybody.
If it was honest these days, it would say James Bond will return maybe if Daniel
when
Craig
we're not tired anymore and we got no idea.
As long as he's still going.
We'll
try
return.
And figure out script in a couple of years.
We'll return when Daniel's finished his run on Broadway and done what he's wanted to, and maybe get Sam Mendes back? ? But he will return.
But yeah, I mean, so you didn't get that sort of type of surprise now. Now, as years have gone by, obviously I've seen all the special features and commentaries and God knows what else that goes with this film. They were approached about doing the sequel, The Two Bobs, and they both said, and I've heard them both say it separately and sort of together, that they had one question, or a two-part question effectively. Michael J. Fox on board, Christopher Lloyd on board, and they said, if we get those two, we can do it. If either of those can't do it, we're not doing it. And that was literally all they said. We'll come up with something. Obviously, they were both on board. And then they submitted, I believe, a 170-page script. And it had pretty much most of 2 and 3 in it. And the head of the studio, and I don't know if it was still Sid Sheinberg, 4 years in this game's a long time, so it may not have been. But let's just say it was. Sid Sheinberg said to them, I'm not greenlighting the most expensive movie in motion picture history because this script was massive. So they went away, stripped it back, cut it down, and came back with basically a cheaper script that said, okay, we can't do just this film for that money, but we can give you 2 films for, I think it was, originally it was going to cost something like 70 million, and what they said is we can give you 2 and 3 together for about 90, a year apart, or 6 months apart in this country. So 2 and 3 sort of came out of the writing process, that they ended up wanting to do too much. If you watch early interviews on the set of the first one, they're asked where they would go if they had a time machine, and Huey Lewis says where he wants to go because he's around on set filming his cameo. Michael J. Fox says the Old West, and I do think that might be where the idea took root. So that's how we ended up with these films, and we'll talk about some of the casting in a minute because there are changes. But yeah, they ended up with a very, very ambitious script. Now, I have read an alternate version of Back to the Future 2, where they go back to 1967 or 68 or 69, I forget which, but my gut feeling is 67, because I think that was the year Marty had to have been conceived. So again, there's an element of fighting to protect his own future life, as there was in the first film, and they just retconned it, or they didn't retcon it, they originally wrote it that Biff gave himself the book then, at like the age of 30 or whatever it would have been. So it was very peace and love, lots of hippie jokes, very sort of just pre-Woodstock. It's not the greatest of scripts. I've read it, I think it would have worked, but it was just during the process of redrafting and talking it out with people that they thought we have a perfect opportunity to go back inside the events of the first film and watch them from different angles. And I think it's inspired that they did so.
Yeah, I think the film only comes alive at that point, where it actually goes back to 1955, and and part of me thinks, am I really enjoying this bit? Is because it's a really good idea, or am I enjoying this bit because I'm almost reliving the original? So I always kind of question that, but I do think that in itself is a really good idea. I would have thought. You can kind of say if they had a good idea for the future, they could have done a film in the future or a film in the West. Kind of it's just kind of what they wanted to, and then gone back to like the original and played with that idea there. That might have worked. I think this film's a little bit of a mess. It doesn't work as well. I think there's a lot of retconning just to kind of get them to where they need to go, and then get them to the next film, which is set in the Old West. So I it's not without its problems, but I do think it is enjoyable though.
Well, I mean, just to sort of my opening thought then on the sort of quality of the film, when it did come out. Now, the thing is, we didn't have like 300 odd reviewers on Rotten Tomatoes. We had like Barry Norman, whatever newspaper our family read, and we may pick up one or two things elsewhere. And I don't remember Barry Norman's review of this, but I remember it by association in that when he reviewed the third one, and he was positive about that, he was drawing distinctions from this. So you could read that his review of this wasn't good. I always loved it. I've had quite a journey with this film because I think there was even a period, and it would have been a short period, where it might have been my favourite of the three. Because it was kind of so ingenious what they did with it, and looking at things you've seen from a different angle, and so many ideas in it. The problem as years have gone by, some of them are sort of stylistic. I mean, Michael J. Fox he's gained a little bit of weight, but when you read his autobiography, he was drinking quite a lot at this stage, and you can kind of see it, because when you drink a lot, it goes on the face.
You kind of got the onset of Parkinson's as well, haven't you? I mean, I don't think he was diagnosed.
He was diagnosed 2 years later.
Yeah, so sort of early 90s. But it's saying about sort of motor skills and things like that, like riding a bike and how to use a hoverboard and stuff like that. But it's like you can attribute it to... I don't think
there's a problem with his performance. I really don't.
Oh God, no.
But I can tell the difference between him this week and him in the first ones, and I can every time I watch the film.
No, it does stand out. But I mean, my problem with the film is that it tries to handle too many storylines at once.
I mean, the point I was going to make was exactly that as years have gone by, two things have started to bother me about the film. The first one is, yes, it's trying to do too much, and on the one hand you can go, look how much they've crammed in, but on the other hand you go, look how much they've crammed in. There's absolutely no need to be trying to do everything like they do. And we only get a third film because it just spills over into it. You almost feel like if they could have done the third film in 20 minutes, they would have done. And consequently, the two films are really unbalanced because this is at breakneck speed and almost not enough happens next week. And it feels kind of stayed and a bit stuck in one location as a result. But I think my second biggest problem, and it's really come on in the last 2 or 3 years, is the film is just way too broad. The film is just so broad. I look at it, Elizabeth Shue, who I think is a pretty decent actress in a lot of things. I always remember her in Leaving Las Vegas before anything else. But she's really broad, and there's a couple of scenes in the film, when she sees the older version, and the way that the exclamation before they fall to the ground. The bit where she's got to hide because her future family are coming home, and she does this big spin before going under the stairs. It's really big and really broad. And you forget now that if you just had the first film, they didn't all play their own relatives. Marty's dad was Crispin Glover, not Michael J. Fox. And you watch this film again, and they're all identical. You've got basically redos of the same scene, and it's not rhyming like Star Wars films or even sometimes Bond films rhyme. It's literally putting the same thing in a different setting, and you just think, well, Biff, Griff, come on, really? Griff? Call him something else. Have him played by the same guy if you really insist. But actually, it would have been better if you'd just taken your cue from the first one and toned it down. And by the time Michael J. Fox comes in playing his own daughter, you're thinking, this is not great. And well, if you were to just watch,
why was it just why is it not just Elizabeth Shue just playing a daughter? I don't understand that.
Anything, anything. Yeah, Elizabeth Shue, for example, they look like their parents. Fair enough, but it's all a bit broad, and it seems to me that it's partly showing off the technology, because for the first time, and we'll talk about it through the film, they were able to have actors with themselves in the same shot rather than over one shot with doubles and all that sort of thing. You can see it now, the way the camera pans looks kind of artificial, but it's a good idea in its way. But you've then got Marty playing himself, Michael J. Fox playing both Marty and Marty Jr. And Marty Jr. is ludicrously whiny. And the only difference is, I don't know if you've ever noticed, he's wearing brown contact lenses when he plays younger Marty. Marty's son looks slightly different, and it's the eyes. But he plays his own daughter. And then, you're insisting on having... we'll talk about Crispin Glover in a minute, because Crispin Glover's not in this film.
No, I do. I've got a very fun fact about him and how he tried to sue Universal afterwards.
Well, we won't talk about it during the film then, but we'll talk about it perhaps at the end when you do fun facts. We'll expand on it then.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
Crispin Glover is not in this film, and we'll talk why in a minute. And you think, well, don't have the character then. But instead they have a double with a different voice and have to put him upside down. Now, I'm talking now suddenly like I hate this film, and I don't. I think it's ingenious, and I'm kind of glad they made it. But if you read a Wikipedia description of the first film, or you saw some key scenes that maybe you're going to see the version of in this film, like Biff getting knocked out or something, and then you watch 2 and 3, you probably wouldn't have a problem. But if all you'd ever known is, say, Back to the Future for like 30 years, and I suddenly said to you, actually, they made 2 sequels, and here they are, I think if all you knew was the first film, whereas we were still in childhood when 2 and 3 came along, I think you would have a problem with how broad it is. You go, look how cartoonish this is. And I think the Biff character is fucking ludicrous in this film, as is Griff. But for all of that, I'm going to say some really positive things as we go through it, because there's a bit of script writing. It's still pretty ingenious, but it's not this lithe, lean script that the first film is. It's ridiculously over bloated, but at least it had ideas, and for that I'm grateful. Becca?
Yeah, definitely. As I was just saying earlier, there are a few technical issues as well, but I would agree, Dave, this film is a very ingenious film. It's known for being ahead of its time and using all the cutting edge tricks of the trade, every trick in the book, in terms of visual effects, how it goes. And I've got a fun fact about one of those towards the end as well. I think it does struggle at times because you're balancing so many different timelines. I think sometimes it's not as lean as it was. It's quite saggy, it's quite baggy. But performances are great. Makeup again is amazing. Costumes, and how they predicted 2015, and was it Jaws 19 or something, directed by Max Spielberg. So there's lots of funny predictions there about the future, some of which or none of which came true. Although the way we're going, we probably will have George 19 or whatever it is.
Well, we haven't had Jaws 5 yet.
No, but it's probably going to get that way.
Came out before this one. So
Sharknado is heading that way.
The whole point, that does back up what I was saying, though, that they just said, let's make a load of silly jokes, because they would never have got to Jaws 19 if they'd still been making Jaws films. It's just
it's just a silly number, isn't it, really? So, but that's one of the things, you can have fun with films about the future. You can either do it quite seriously and say, right, okay, judging by these scientific advances, how would we be living our lives in the future? Or you can just go the other way and say, let's just throw caution to the wind and say we'll have hoverboards, 2 ties and all the rest of it, blah, 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 blah. But on the plus side, I do enjoy this film for its technological advances, and in terms of its script and brilliant performances as well. But on the minus side, it does try to juggle too many plates and doesn't always succeed. But yeah, that's pretty much how I see this film in a nutshell. Let's discuss this film in a sequential fashion.
We start off from the where we left off, really. I mean,
we do.
Marty's literally just got back.
Although we can't really do it in a sequential fashion because it hops back and forth.
Well, we can talk through the
do
sequence
our
of the
best.
film, obviously, but of course they had to reshoot this. Now, the reason they had to reshoot this, now I think because Michael J. Fox looks more different than you'd imagine. I mean, he aged really well, and he still looks good now. And actually, talking to Curb Your Enthusiasm, he had a tiny cameo in episode 9, and it's really funny because he was in season 7 or 8. I forget which one now, but anyway, he aged really well. But like I say, he didn't become massively obese or anything like that. I don't want to overstate this, but Michael J. Fox, when you read his autobiography, which I did years and years ago, in the couple of years that led up to his diagnosis, he says he was drinking too much. And I think I can see it because I know what drinkers look like. If you compare the first film to this, he's fuller in the face. That's the big giveaway. Now, given that you're going to go straight into the second film, it's probably wise to reshoot that bit anyway. But the major reason they had to reshoot it, and they left his hair slightly too long, which does annoy me. But anyway, the reason they reshot it is Jennifer has been recast. Now, we had Claudia Wells in the first film. Her mother was taken ill. I think it may have been breast cancer, but her mother was taken ill anyway. So she had to drop out. And she dropped out of acting for years. She now runs like a boutique on like a fashion brand, Claudia Wells. But yeah, so they cast Elizabeth Shue instead, which, funnily enough, I've seen Elizabeth Shue in a lot of things since over the years where I think she's really good and really appropriate. But something about this role, the wig they put her in, the clothing that she's had to inherit from the first version of the character as well, with those weird coloured pants and stuff, doesn't look good. I don't like the Jennifer character in 2 and 3.
They don't do anything with it though. Like, I mean, I don't think it's down to Elizabeth Shue in her defence. It's a lot of it is just down to like poor writing. Like,
oh, I mean, I can back that up because obviously they said we had no idea. People always said to us, they were saying, you know, where is it you would have gone, or where was it they did go, or what happened next. And they said, we don't know. It's just them going off on their next adventure. And they said the biggest giveaway is if we were to have planned the second film, Jennifer would have been in the car. It would have just been Marty and Doc. So consequently, as soon as we got to 2015, we had to kind of
get rid of her as much as possible.
Get rid of her as soon as possible. So you're right, Chris.
And also what really bugs me straight off the bat here is when Doc's like saying like, oh, I couldn't have I had to get you there. You know, whatever. I didn't have time, so it was just easy just to grab her and take her with us for the meantime. Meantime, he knocks her out using like a weird new gadget thing, and then he rushes Marty in this like new planned thing that he must do. It's like, you're in a time machine. What's the fucking rush? Why don't you sort of, Marty, right? Okay, we need to do something. Something happens in the future. Let's plan this thing statistically, verbatim. Like, you know, let's go through it. Let's take our time, and then when we go back, we know exactly what we're doing. But no,
I mean, it's not as silly. It's not as silly as the line in Terminator Genesis, because there isn't a killer line that makes you go, "Oh, that is so dumb." But it's not actually any smarter than we've got to get to the future as quickly as possible, which was the line in Terminator Genesis I laughed at so much. You're absolutely right. What's the fucking hurry? Let him have a week at home. He hasn't had any fucking sleep, really. I mean, he got in the middle of the night. You dropped him off at 1:30. He's got up in the morning. He's been in his living room for moments. Gone outside, picked up his car, and then you've turned up. Let the guy, like, fucking rest for a week.
And also like with the DeLorean, flying DeLorean, like in the middle of the day of a suburban road. No wonder like Biff walks out and say, "What the fuck?"
Yeah.
You know, it's just a bit of that.
Do you know, I misheard that for years because one thing I will like, because obviously we've discussed the scene at the end because it's the end of the scene that's at the end of Back to the Future. But there's a couple of slight differences. Firstly, if you're looking, you can tell Christopher Lloyd has like something on his face, which he's later going to rip off, and that wasn't there in the first film. The other thing is, they say, "What, do we become assholes or something?" And they've put a beat in this time. There's a bit where he pauses before he replies that wasn't there in the first filming of the scene. And it is because he's not quite sure what to say for a second, because Marty does screw his life up. But of course, they get into the car, take off as they did in the first film. And then, of course, Biff runs out and says, "Marty," whatever it was he says. and then beautifully, as Thomas Wilson always does, changes his voice straight into bully Biff. But there's a bit where he says, "Flying DeLorean?" I thought for years he said, "My DeLorean." And I thought Doc had stolen that car from Biff. And then, of course, in the first film, Biff had to drive George's. And I honestly thought he'd stolen it on the quiet from Biff. So I misheard that for years.
Ah, that would have been quite a... Well, that would have made sense. I mean, yeah. I mean,
particularly as old Biff sees it in the future. And, of course, he says the flying DeLorean again. And it sounds again like my DeLorean. And I thought that for years because he says it twice in two different timelines. But the one thing I will say is we cut straight to the opening titles from this. And I love that. The opening titles have such fucking speed and energy in them as we go in through the clouds. I love that. It's on the start of this episode.
Well, it feels like a Superman film, really. It
does look a little bit like Superman, doesn't it?
I was like,
just
is
the
really
speedy rendition
future?
of music.
It was like, I was thinking, what would they really be in the clouds? Like, they just gone back in time and they go straight. I don't know.
Back in time.
But I mean, it disappointed me as a kid when I went to see the third one. It had the really gentle music, and I was like, "Oh, there was so much." The second one was so much more exciting when it started. But some of the car effects, flying car effects, kind of remind me of Blade Runner a little bit. They don't look quite right, but the best they could do in 1989. But we get straight into, like we say, a load of jokes, and also the one thing that did remind me of Blade Runner, and there isn't a lot, is the weather patterns. I don't know if that is kind of like a climate change comment, because California is not known for a wild amount of rain, or much of it isn't anyway. And of course, they are in very, very heavy rain when they get there.
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to really tell. I mean, it could just be like a callback to Blade Runner.
Could be. Don't know.
Maybe.
But yeah, no.
But actually, this scene tells you why we don't have flying cars, because it looks fucking dangerous as hell.
And there's still there's still like traffic. You're still like in your lanes and shit. So yeah, but yeah. So like they bring Jennifer along. And there's a lot of like retconning. So they go. So he talks about what he has to do. Knocks Jennifer out. So I think what it is about this first part is it just feels so rushed and so lazy when you compare it to the first one, which is
one of the tightest scripts ever made.
Yeah, really well written, and this just feels like just rushed and kind of mishandled and just kind of just get through it, just make up stuff. Yeah, that'll do, kind of thing. I think that's what really lets it down. But yeah, they get to, well, basically they land on the Doc casually. I mean, to be honest, I don't know what the fuck Doc is actually doing. He keeps saying he needs to be somewhere, but I actually don't know why.
No, none of it makes a lot of sense, because if you think he's picked him up from home, and then they're driving for ages to get to Hill Valley, which we know is only like a mile or two because Marty walked it in the first film. So none of that quite works. But they drop in this alley. They've knocked out Jennifer with like an alpha thing. It's basically to induce sleep rhythms or whatever it is. And it is just a load of jokes from now on, and it's such a perfunctory thing. They've had to go
just leave her down an alleyway rather than like, why don't you just keep her in a DeLorean?
Leave her in the car. It's safer. Sure. Do you leave a woman knocked out and unattended in a place with no great visibility? And it's
in the
not
future
the best
where
idea.
It's going to be dangerous as well,
I mean, that's not just 2017 sensibility talking. That was true at the time as well. It wasn't the most sensible thing to do. But all of Act 1 feels totally perfunctory, because the whole driving point of this plot turns out to be the sports almanac. This whole business about Marty's kid is just something to get us underway.
Yeah. And it's basically a retread of the diner scene in the first film. It's like we're barely 15 minutes in. And
it's not really earned it, has it? It's not really earned this. Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, we're just going to sort of retread the first film already. We're just going to sort of we're going to go through like the main go for the main sort of the greatest hits, but kind of like remix.
This is not the bit of the film that interests the writers. You can tell. Whereas I can't tell you with the first film. I mean, the chances are it all did, and that's why. But if you said to me, like, which bits did they really enjoy writing and making most in the first film, I don't know. I really don't know. Whereas here, I can tell this is just a bit they've got to get done because they're kind of a bit self-conscious about being in the future to start with because they know it's going to be miles off whatever they do. It's easier to look back always. And so they do a load of stuff that they know isn't going to happen. Flying cars will certainly not with any kind of extrapolation of modern technology and us driving. It's never going to happen.
Maglev cars at this rate.
It's too dangerous. Inflation is ridiculous. What everything costs is.
Especially if you're in Zimbabwe.
Hey.
Zimbabwe inflation has gone.
Yeah, but I'm talking about California.
I know, but I was just sort of thinking, elsewhere in the world, they've kind of,
But no, the point is, it was inflation did nothing like this film actually extrapolate. So they pay hundreds of dollars for like a taxi. So you've got hover conversions that ain't going to work. You've got, holographic 3D, and I guess there's something to that. But Jaws 19, they were never really predicting. And fashion trends, they just picked something a bit goofy and different. I don't think it was a prediction to say they'd wear their trousers inside out.
Yeah, I mean, I do like the idea of a jacket that dries you.
That's a good idea.
That seems pretty nifty to me.
Yeah, which came true in 2017 with Spider-Man Homecoming.
Oh, yeah.
Spider-Man is now self-drying.
Self-drying Spidey suit.
So, yeah, none of this is that great. And it is like him going, power laces and stuff like that. But it is...
That would be useful.
It is literally... The first act of this film is just to undo the way they set this film up because they didn't think they were setting a film up. So they got to do something with Jennifer. And also it was something's got to be done about your kids. So they were locked into something about Marty's kids. Well, we're not going to care about Marty's kids particularly. They're just notional in 1985. So they've got to undo it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I mean, they're not that likable, are they? I mean, Marty Jr.
Well, they're still going to be assholes even if you keep them out of prison.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah, I mean...
With Marty McFly, we start this storyline, which is another thing I don't like, the whole chicken thing. Well, we won't go into it now. We'll go into it a bit later in the film. But clearly something happens to Marty. And you think, well, if you can undo that, he could be a great guy, because we've got to know him and he's a great guy. If you keep Marty Jr. out of prison, he'll still be a twat. That's the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, partly that just that Marty Sr. is a screw-up.
I suppose it's partly that. But even the character, I know he's a bit bitter in that, but when he comes home and he says, like, watching a bit of TV for a change, and I'm just thinking, that's not an extrapolation of any Marty we know.
No.
But did you notice the little star cameo that wasn't a star at this stage? In the cafe.
Not Billy Zane?
No. Yeah.
Oh, yes, it's Elijah Wood. It's his
I don't know why you don't mention Billy Zane.
I would have thought that would be in Fun Facts.
I was going to have a fun fact, but I thought we'll mention Elijah Wood as we get there. So it was going to be a fun fact. But yeah, no, I think that's his first film credit.
It might well have been, because the first thing I ever remember him in was like North or something.
North, yeah, no, I think that was like his first like on-screen credit, definitely.
Yeah,
fun fact.
One of the kids at that machine, that's like a baby's toy, is Elijah Wood.
Yeah, but it looks so cute.
You use your hands.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
So again, it's just lines, isn't it, really? And, little things like the fish out of water elements of humour are okay. Like the Pepsi Perfect comes to him and he can't open it because he's got no idea how the containers of the future work. And that is a callback to the first film because, all right, he knows how a cup of coffee works, but he didn't even know how to order something then because it was like he was ordering stuff that wasn't from the era.
Yeah.
So yeah, the fish out of water stuff works.
Also about opening the bottle as well. I didn't realise it was a screw top. You had to actually old-fashioned bottle opener.
Yeah, actually that's right. And then we meet Griff.
Hey, McFly, don't go anywhere. I mean, he sounds like a
He's
Muppet.
crazy, isn't he?
He sounds like Bob Cockfield.
Basically.
He does, yeah.
Bit.
I think so. I do like Biff. I think he's a great villain.
Oh, I do. Although they overcook him in this film, but yeah.
Yeah, he has as Griff though is just a little bit over the top. As I said before, it's just a little bit. All right, tone it down. Jesus Christ, like what, what's wrong with him just being like really aggressive?
You didn't need this sequence, and again, the films never seem to me, to this point, to be based around 10 minutes time for another action sequence, like I used to talk to you about the Brosnan Bond and stuff. But this whole thing is just pointless. I mean, you did the joke about the weather, you did the joke about his face when he ripped it off and looked exactly the fucking same, although they genuinely did need to take that off him now because of the old age makeup.
That was another thing as well. I thought, okay, like, you had to like sort of find a reason for Doc to not look old all the time.
Yeah, although I never thought he did look that old.
No.
But then, of course, that was resolution. When I saw it on the big screen, yeah, you can see it around the eyes and neck. But the abolish all lawyers line, all that sort of thing, the holographic on the newspaper.
Yeah.
Which is funny, we've just abolished newspapers, really. Just read them on a tablet. But some of these things were fun, but the whole sequence went on too long. And not only that, it was kind of predictable because we'd seen it in the first film. So, yeah, I didn't love this, I have to say. But even though I was always impressed by this film, I didn't enjoy this bit that much at the time.
No. I mean, it did give us hoverboards, though, I guess.
Well, in pop culture, they're quite a big thing still. People, they're still the sort of holy grail of everyone wants them. But not being into skateboarding at all, I couldn't give a shit. Give me the fucking tiny pizza that gets big. So there you go.
Even though it looks gross.
Yeah, that's the fat bastard commenting. But it was okay. Some of the effects don't look that good. I mean, the worst effect is when is it the Pitbull? Griff's hoverboard. When he drops that out of the case.
Because it was going to be called Mad Dog, wasn't it?
That doesn't look right. Actually, that would have been quite a nice little in-joke, actually.
I think it had a different name, but I think, one of the fun facts I was reading up on about the film, it was going to be called Mad Dog to segue into the third one with a West End setting.
West End setting?
No, West End setting, sorry.
Oh, I thought you said West End. I was like, yeah.
Yes, an London show.
Yeah. Bit of dinner.
Yes, what a dinner and a show, why not?
Yeah, I was quite glad when this was all over, and as soon as he went and bought I couldn't have predicted what happened, and I didn't know what happened, but I think as soon as he went and bought the almanac, I thought that's got to be key to this.
I mean, what did you feel about Marty just basically just being a dick all of a sudden? And also the reckless nature of like having these conversations out in the open, and
the only thing I would say is he was lectured all the way through the first film about not knowing your own future, not attempting to change the future, etc., which is effectively the reason they say don't know your own future, not so you don't change it. And then, of course, at the end of the film, Doc goes, "What the hell?" and it saves his life. So I can understand that Marty then doesn't think of it as a completely sacrosanct rule. At the same time, it doesn't feel quite right for the character to be doing this. Having said that, he wanted that. He is quite a materialistic character, actually. But I don't know. I'm still not sure, actually. I've got a big problem with the fucking chicken bit, which we've just missed talking about because it has just happened. Marty continually in films 2 and 3 keeps getting himself into, like, not trouble as such, but keeps confronting situations he doesn't need to confront, because as he's about to walk away, someone calls him a chicken, or in the third one, yellow, which is the same thing, really. And it doesn't ring true, because that plot point wasn't there, that character point wasn't there in the first film. And it's almost like the idea that he sees a red mist, but that doesn't suit Michael J. Fox as an actor. He's seen red mist, friendly old Michael J. Fox.
It makes him come across as stupid as well. It's like, because...
Well, his IQ drops 80 points the minute anyone calls him a chicken.
Yeah, it's just, it's so stupid because it's so clearly like, okay, well, I can get him to do anything. All I have to do is call him a chicken and he'll do it.
Yeah.
And it's just such the dumbest idea in the world that you just don't believe. You just think, oh, for fuck's sake, Marty, or what? It's just kind of.
What does it matter? This is, I mean, really, Christ, if you thought about this for a second, this is only a possible future human being.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This is just where time may end up. Walk away, it doesn't matter. So I don't like that plot point, but it's just too. So that I think that does create a problem, because the whole point is, can Marty put his own life right? Well, I don't really buy his life's gone wrong, if I'm honest, because that's just not the way the character would have behaved.
Yeah.
And if you're going to have that as a character point, if it had been consistent with the first one, had they known this was going to be the trilogy they were going to make, you don't cast Michael J. Fox, because he's not the right character for the sudden sees the red mists and dumbly overreacts.
Yeah, it at least would have established it in the first one. It would have been a thing that he did. That, or it would have at least. I can almost see it as a way of like, how he's.
You'd have done it in the cafe when George went to chat up Lorraine in the cafe. Lou, milk, chocolate, which I love as a scene.
Yeah,
it's skidding down the bar. We didn't mention that last week, but Marty would have come in, tried to defend him. They would have both ended up being bullied or something. He would have tried to shepherd George away and then be called a chicken. You could have kept Back to the Future substantially the same film and thrown that in.
You could tie in a connection in terms of like, it's more of like he doesn't want to be like his dad who's a pushover, so whenever accuse him of being like that, it's like something.
No McFly ever amounted to anything.
He has
you changed that. Or you changed that line to Strickland saying something like, "No McFlys have ever had any guts. You're all a bunch of chickens," or something like that. You don't grab life. That's how you do it. It's not that difficult. But obviously you can't retcon it at this stage, and it doesn't look right.
Yeah, it just feels very much like a character trait that has just been forced in. Even when I like this film more than I do now, it always felt forced in. Yeah.
Because when I first saw him do it, and you got that little sting of music, which you get every time, I was just like, what's this? And then it leads to the bit of the film that I think is at once the most ingenious and the worst bit.
Oh.
Because basically he buys the almanac, Doc throws it away. To cut a very long story short, Jennifer's been taken home. She's been found by a police car. And of course it's all thumb and eye prints, so they think she's Jennifer McFly from 2015.
Yeah.
They take her home, so now they've got to go and rescue her, and it leads to all these frigging jokes about them all looking the same. And the needles thing, he gets goaded into losing his job, which is just not what would happen with this character.
Yeah, it's again with the needle. It's like it's almost as if he's a new character that just comes in as if like he's already like another bit.
Like he's always been there.
Yeah, it's like, well, we didn't see you in the first one. It's like, it's like it's Flea from Red Hot Chili Peppers.
It's Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
And the problem is he turns up again like at the end of the next one, and it's almost feels like, oh, it's you again. But it's like, no, this is
well.
literally
The
first...
thing is, as well, we don't spend any real time in '85. Not in the original Marty's 1985. I know we get the alternate one, so we don't know if there's any. We don't think there's any Biff equivalent in his generation. So there's always a Biff bullying a McFly, kind of. But we don't know if there's one in 1985. So when we see Flea, Needles, we don't get the impression he's a bully, more that he's kind of one of the cool kids and goads Marty a lot. One thing they did do is, and they said it on the commentary, that when you say Needles, this is from the third film, but I'll quickly throw it in here. When you see Needles at the lights with Marty, there's 3 guys on the truck with him, and they're one of Biff's gang members from the 3 different eras. So there's one of his 1955 gang, there's one of his 2015 gang, the actors, and there's one from 1885. And I think that's almost trying to retcon that Needles is kind of the Biff of that era. It doesn't work.
No, I think that is a bit of a... I never spotted that before, actually.
Oh, I did.
I think this film is retcon all over.
Yeah.
So it's not Billy Zane if you can spot him. He's not.
No, it's more like 3D if you can spot him. It's more like,
I know. I mean, that's the kind of impression they kind of give, and it just it just feels like, well, he should have been more established then, shouldn't it? You know, But
what can you do? When they say, "Oh, we never wanted to make a sequel," I think there are people out there who probably think, "Oh, that's not true," and actually, all of this stuff we're picking out is evidence.
Yeah,
it doesn't make it bad. We're making it sound far worse than it is. Back to the Future 2 is a really fascinating sequel.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was going to say, it's not terrible. If anything, it is watchable with some good, interesting bits and some poorly done bits.
But it's following.
But it is following like one of the greatest films ever made. So it's good. By comparison, we're going to be kind of sound like we're going to be negative on it. So. There we are. So we're at the Fly household, and everyone's wearing two ties, and no one looks like Elizabeth Shue apart from Elizabeth Shue.
Yeah.
And
that's very strange.
And also, they age terribly. 47-year-olds do not generally look like this, particularly Elizabeth Shue when she gets home. It's like, fucking hell. She looks about 60, 65.
Especially when in the future where everyone can have like really sort of well done facelifts and get
I know. I suppose he's meant to be relatively poor, because that's another thing that does rhyme with the first film. That Lyons Estates is being built in the 50s, and it's meant to be, the new modern American house and the American dream, own your own home here. And by the time it gets to where Marty's family own it, it's owned by a guy who's like a bit of a loser. And I think Hilldale's meant to be the same. That in 1985, this looks like it's going to be an amazing estate. By the time you get to 2015, it's no longer quite the dream.
Mm.
They've got a smashed window. They're being spoken to. She's being spoken to by the police about security and taking precautions, particularly in this area.
But Biff gets told be careful. It's a rough neighborhood.
Yeah, and he's an old man by that point as well, so you don't want a 77-year-old man around here. But I don't really like this sequence. I liked it at the time because it was so like, wow, how did they do that? And basically, I mean, I can't explain everything about how they did it because I don't know everything about how they did it. But you basically repass, you keep everything in the same place. Because they had a bit of a panic at one point because there was an earthquake overnight. But nothing had moved on the set. Everything had sort of stayed in the place they'd sort of stuck it, thankfully. So it is about multiple passes in the same place. But I just think if it wasn't look what we can do, I'm not sure they'd have done this scene. If this had been a scene with, let's flip it. Let's say Marty McFly is the head of the household and his daughters are played by, let's say, Wendy's Joe Sperber, his sister from the first one, and his son's played by Mark McClure, or even Crispin Glover if they'd got Crispin Glover on board. So I don't think this scene would have gone on so long, and they talk a lot in the commentaries about how they made sure, because they shot it a certain way and people were saying you're only shooting it that way because you're showing off the technology, and so they deliberately went back to shooting it like a much more traditional scene. But I still think the reason this scene exists the way it exists is to show off, look, Michael J. Fox is playing three people in the same scene, because it's too long and utterly fucking pointless. Because the only point we need, remember the first film, advanced plot or character in every scene.
Yeah.
The only point to this scene is Marty's not that happy, so the bit of him playing the guitar and not really being able to do it, and the bit of him being fired by needles is all you need. The rest of it's a waste of time.
Oh, he gets fired in the greatest way possible, isn't it? Like the most stereotypical angry Japanese man. You're fired!
There's actually two bits of this film that are racially insensitive.
This is a little bit. You can look at it now and cringe. You just think, oh, really?
We'll come to the really obvious.
I just love that he gets a fax on all different rooms saying you're fired. That's how quick it is. It's not just like, oh yeah, well, no due process, no nothing. Just literally
you're fired.
Yeah, I mean, traditionally, as far as I understand it, it is easier to fire people in North America than it is in, say, Europe. But even so, I wouldn't have necessarily expected to be like that. But some kind of fraud has taken place. none of this reflects very well on future Marty. And whilst you think, yes, he might be bitter and twisted, he's still married to the love of his life. He's still got 2 children. And he's still supposed to be some extrapolation of the Michael J. Fox we've followed. And yet he's now done something criminal. That I'm not quite comfortable with. And where
that's a bit strange, isn't it?
I just think actually a lot of this film's a bit of a betrayal of the characters.
Well, the problem is, though, it's all meant to be led to, like, this incident that happened because someone called him chicken. But we've never seen it. We're always kind of, like, told about it in passing, like, in almost, like, as, like, background noise. Or,
Yeah.
like, almost. So it never feels like a point that's been head on. Now, I don't have a problem with, like, sort of adding in details here and there, but you know, it just feels very much like maybe you should establish this a little bit better.
Yeah, because is it a problem he can ever ignore? Has it happened a lot? Is it just that one accident, or is his life continually ruined by being chicken? We see him fired, but I mean, chicken is an insult that seems to be thrown at him and his offspring quite fucking regularly in this film. So how is he even still alive if he overreacts like this? But also, the worst thing about any of it, for me, and again, it's a film that I like a lot more than is coming across here, but it's that whole show don't tell thing. Now, there are films that break that rule and get away with it. Inception's a really obvious example that a lot of that needed to be explained to us. But we find out about this. We find out about the car accident by Lorraine explaining it to one of her own fucking family who's related to him and would know this story within earshot of young Jennifer. Well, that's lazy. That's lazy. We shouldn't necessarily know it was an accident.
Yeah.
We should, find another way to tell us that. Or when that reverses the firing and everything else, maybe Doc explains that at the end, that was actually the moment we couldn't tell you. I don't know. I'm not a writer, but I don't like the fact that it comes out as a data dump, and that's my problem with everything in the Hilldale scene. The only plus to it is Biff following him. I quite like that as a cartoon.
I would agree that it's a bit of a data dump, I would say.
I like Biff's cane as well.
Yeah, that's kind of everything's all sort of heavy-handed, like as a plot point. Oh, he smashes his cane in, so it's there to give them a clue that it was Biff. It all just seems very much like oh well, he has to do it that he has to do this, that, to do that way. I mean,
they don't bury the lead at all, do they?
No. I mean, I do like how Biff comes out like feeling unwell. I mean, there was a deleted bit where you see him almost like curl up and fade away, as if he's like completely changed.
Yeah, I mean, in the cut of the film we get, it still leads to the question, which has been answered, as how did Biff come back to the same 1985, and what's wrong with him? And of course, because he's a 77-year-old man, you assume it's the sort of stress on his body of the time travel, and he's having like a heart attack or something. What it actually is time is changing around him, or he's fading out of existence because that time will disappear, but it takes a while to filter through. So perhaps by the time Marty and Doc are running to the DeLorean, it's already different people in their house at Hilldale. It's changing around them.
Yeah.
But the thing is, that's all being explained in commentaries and stuff, because the film doesn't quite do that. But it does mean they head back to 1985. They go home because they've got they've saved Marty. They've got Jennifer back. They've saved Marty Jr. They've got Jennifer back, so they're going home to the next racist bit of the film.
The next racist bit.
Let's from one racist bit to the other. But I think it's very much.
Is it racist though? Like he's sort of sneaking into a black girl's room, like.
Yes, it's not really racist. It's just views of the day.
It's not the sneaking into a black girl's room. It's the fact that that's become more of a hellhole than it was, that estate. And to prove it, you've put bars on the window, and now it's something black people can afford. That's what it is. It's the fact that it's now not white middle class, it's black, rough working class. That's racially insensitive if you think about it. And it's not overthinking it, Chris. That is racially insensitive, but I don't think it's deliberately racist.
No.
I think it's a shorthand to suggest that that area has declined in the new version of 1985. But when you're proving it's declined by putting bars on the window and then putting an African American family in there, you've done it the wrong way.
I think you have a point. I think you're right in what you say, but I don't think that's what they were thinking. I
don't. I think it's racially insensitive, not racist. They're different things. One is we didn't really think about it, and the other racist would be, how do we show this area's gone downhill? Put a black family in there. Racially insensitive is putting a black family in there with perhaps the realities of the economics of the time.
Yeah.
And not realising, hang on a minute, this does look a bit dodgy.
I think there's also maybe, I don't know. No, I was going to say that there's the extra sensitivity of of Marty going into the room and finding himself in there, and then being like, "Oh shit," having that reaction. Also, there's a little callback to the first one where he kind of gets caught in the farmhouse. Remind me a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, and also how he gets into his house when he gets home. He sort of goes in the back way, not to offend anyone. Sort of climbs, wake anyone, climbs in the window, that sort of thing. She's very mad on Michael Jackson. This girl. It's all Michael Jackson posters, which is funny because the film's set 4 years before this one is. That it was actually the sequel was released. Which feels like a long time when you're a kid, so it's already sort of set in the past. But of course, Michael Jackson was a different colour by the time this film was released than he is in those posters, because it's like Thriller era Michael Jackson.
Yeah. But, Michael Jackson was popular anyway, so
Michael Jackson stayed popular right the way through the 80s and most of the 90s. So, yeah, that's absolutely fine.
So he finds himself like, what the hell's going on? And
but that was the other thing. It isn't just because you could go with the whole area's been, but he comes after him with a baseball bat and he starts saying, "We are not going to be terrorized." So they've obviously been trying to be forced out of that house.
Yeah. There's stuff about the sort of he almost says he's from the landlord or something.
What I suspect, given Biff, as we find out in a minute, has knocked down the courthouse and stuff, I suspect Biff wants to build casinos there or something like that, or brothels or basically good time area. He wants to build there, probably. That would be most likely. So of course Marty gets out of there, and where does he go next? Go straight to docks.
No, well, doesn't he find himself
Oh no! He goes to the square, doesn't he?
Yeah, he sees Strickland. Yeah, he calls himself a slacker.
The school burned down in 1978. There is a deleted scene where we see it. Obviously, some sort of model work, but it's quite well done because you've got him stood by some fencing, and in the background is a burnt out school, burnt out remains of the school. But they cut it because they said, "Well, we've already got that information from Strickland. It's a bit heavy-handed." Now you spotted heavy-handed. Well done. I quite like the Strickland scene though because it just makes it seem. It does make it seem like a city that's completely under siege.
Yeah, because he's in a bulletproof vest and a shotgun, and there's people firing machine guns at him. So he just
for fun.
Yeah.
And then of course Marty gets away from there, gets into the square. And again, it's another data dump, but I quite like it. I do like the video of the history of Biff Tannen, the greatest resident.
You also get a sneak peek into the third film where you see
Buford.
Yeah, Mad Dog Tannen.
Yeah, Buford Mad Dog Tannen,
the fastest gun in the West.
So what do we get told here? We get told that he won at the races in 1958.
Yeah.
So 21, he became a millionaire overnight. Had a big running streak, which he put into a company called Biffco, which I think is an amazing name for a company.
Biffco, that's a great name, isn't it? Yeah.
It's great, isn't it? And I love the fact that he married, shows him with a load of women, some lovely Photoshop. And Thomas L. Wilson's such a great actor. Just him with Marilyn Monroe and the look on his face, it's just great. Because he can play any age as well. I just love it. But I love when he marries Lorraine, not only does he stick his tongue really visibly into her mouth, but before he does it, he says, "Third time's a charm." So the video's going on about how it's the love of his life. But it's already his third marriage. And he's only in like his early 30s at that point.
I know, but it's just how Lorraine just looks. She's just completely defeated as well. Completely just like not happy at all.
I just want to say, God bless America and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's a great piece of filmmaking. I mean, again, it is a data dump, but they've managed to paint this place as a real hell on earth. I mean, I've often joked it's like Pottersville, and it is, because it's an alternate version of your hometown. But Pottersville, and I'm joking, because Bedford Falls is way more charming, and I wouldn't necessarily want a load of strip clubs and that. But as much as it's an extrapolation of humour, there is a part of me that looks at it like Pottersville and go, that looks quite a vibrant, fun place. You wouldn't think that about 1985 Hill Valley, would you?
Well, it's all just factories, is it? And factories, and like you've got your big hotel / casino where Biff lives, and everything else is a shithole, really.
But I love the video. Some thought went into that. It's really well narrated. It's got that kind of touristy kind of sound to it. I like it. And of course, they knock him out and take him back, and we get a repetition of the joke from the first film of him waiting.
Come on, you're so big.
That is a chest piece. I don't think she got it from Ricardo Montalbano.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But it is a chest piece. Because I would always look at them and go, fuck, I didn't know she was built like that. She isn't. It's horrible because she's a very different build from in the first film, because she was overweight as the unhappy 1980s Lorraine and a drunk. Here she's like tons of plastic surgery to look a bit better, but she's back to drunk Lorraine again, and it's awful. And then Biff comes in screaming.
Yeah, basically balding
Donald
Biff.
Trump.
Well, I don't know. I don't think he hasn't.
I'm not saying he is.
He hasn't
Donald
got
Trump,
quite the
kind of looks a bit
hairpiece.
like it's not as scrumptious a wig. No, it's
just a jumped up asshole, really. I mean, it's just
he is a real old asshole, but it's just a wonderful piece of like just the costuming. He's very, very alpha male.
Tactless. He's got the taste of Donald Trump in terms of his taste, but in terms of being tacky, but but
it's just
outwardly aggressive, like.
I know, but it's the taste of the place. The whole place is like leopard prints and stuff like that. It's really tacky.
It's like Del Boy. It's Del Boy.
It's very Del Boy, actually. There's certainly certain eras of Only Fools and Horses where some of those literal patterns were used. But the other thing is, he's having like threesomes in the same apartment as his wife is, without obviously his wife being, say, a consensual part of that. And so it is totally an ego run amok, because he's had 20 odd years of being able to live like this. And it's just it's made him completely grotesque, even though I think they've gone too far with the character.
Well, basically, he's been essentially the big fish in that small pond now. He's had so much money, and he's basically just sort of like bought the area, and just used his money for having that power and making everyone basically fucking everyone else over. So the only reason why he hasn't gone out of business is because he's made himself that rich through the betting.
The other thing is we find out a bit later on that he was at least complicit in George's murder. We'll get to the George's murder bit in a minute. 'Cause I almost didn't want to sort of reveal it, but we got to sort of do that to talk about it. But the police obviously didn't investigate it that thoroughly. Yeah. He's knocked down the courthouse, which you would think is whatever the equivalent of a listed building is over there. That implies he's got courts and the police in his pockets.
Yeah.
So he can do whatever he wants. So he can beat his wife, he can beat the stepchildren, he can get them fitted up on drugs charges, as he threatens to do with Dave. He can do whatever he wants.
Yeah, he can sort of take away all the bills. Apparently, got.
So whilst I've long had a sort of print theory that like particularly men tend to behave as badly as we're allowed to behave, this still seems a gross exaggeration of what any version of Biff would become. He's a petty bully. Here we're implying murder and things like that. I think that's pushing it.
I always thought that, but then there was a thing. I mean, we do go back to back to 55 later on, and we see Biff just basically comes out of his grandma's house, and he and he gets the ball that like some kids are playing with it, and he's like teased with them. And he goes like, "Oh yeah, well, you know, basically just being a dick for the sake of being a dick," and just like throws the ball on the roof and then and like tells him to go get it, and walks away and laughs. That's kind of like, all right, there's a part. The problem with Biff is he enjoys basically being a dick, because he is that, you know. So I understand how money might go to someone's head, like over the years.
It's not a massive problem.
No.
I didn't sit there ever thinking, well, what a gross betrayal of the character. But I just go,
it's a huge. It's just a huge
it's a leap.
jump. You know, it's like, because again, it's a info dump. It's like, all right, so we imagine.
You either accept this, we're going to tell you this, and you either accept it or you don't. Because we're not really sold it, I'm tempted to say, no, I don't buy it, because George McFly hit him once and was his bitch thereafter. This is a bully, a classic bully that, you know, he blows over in a stiff breeze, really. It's a leap. It is a leap. Having said that, it makes him genuinely intimidating in all of his scenes with Marty in this timeline.
Yeah. So yeah, he basically tells Marty to piss off, essentially, because he's supposed to be somewhere else. So Marty goes to.
Well, before that, he disappears out. Marty then says, "I don't know what's going on. Where's George McFly?"
Yeah. And then find out that George is dead.
He died. He was shot in 1973, which is around the time Lorraine married Biff. Mm. So basically, although it does say, firstly, it's on the newspaper, because it has to use Crispin Glover, it uses a picture from what is clearly 1985 at the end of the first film. And it also says he's a famous author, when actually his first book was published in 1985. So again, it's all like struggling around what we have. And again, they're minor points, but I noticed them at the time, and it was like, okay, all right, couldn't you have just done something else? But anyway, he's been murdered, and Doc Brown was committed. His place is all locked up. There is no, like, Einstein there or anything like that.
Yeah. So he goes to the grave and goes, "No, it's not true." I mean, it's almost kind of like It's a Wonderful Life, isn't it? We're like,
I think, funnily enough,
his brother.
The first one, tonally and quality, very much reminds me of It's a Wonderful Life. But actually, when I start saying to people, "Oh, it's just like It's a Wonderful Life," I prove it with examples from this film.
Yeah. Like Pottersville.
Very like it. Yeah, you can imagine him turning around and saying, "Harry died. All those men on that ship died because they all died because you weren't there. Harry wasn't there to save them because you weren't there to save Harry."
Yeah.
See, it's the same scene. It's the same basic principle. But then we get Doc give us a data dump. But it's quite effective the way Doc just draws the line on the board.
Yeah.
And just says excuse off here. Because actually, you are dealing with a mixed ability audience watching this, and there will be people in the audience who will think, "Oh God, they've got to go back to 2015 then and stop him doing the book," and they address that. So that's actually a good bit of writing.
Yeah. So now they have to go. Okay, we have to figure out when did he get the book, and conveniently enough, Marty goes, "Well, I'll just go and ask him." And he goes, "Oh yeah, I'll tell you the whole story of how exactly I got the book." And then
and it happens to be like a fairly easy to remember day.
Yeah.
He doesn't go and see him, and he goes, "Oh, I don't know, I was about fucking 17, I think. I'm not sure."
Yeah. but it is quite clever. So I've just picked up my car after getting cleaned up from I thought he got hit by a manure truck.
I rolled it in a drag race.
Yeah.
My dad told me, and then he just pauses and goes, before he died, he's still got wonderful comic timing. Of course, the first thought that springs into your mind, he leaves enough of a gap that you go, wouldn't he have been about 5 at the time? And then he just spits out, before he died. And it's like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense, but Biff lets it go. But that's a guy thinking on the hop. That's good writing, not bad writing.
Yeah.
But then he tells him the story of how he got it from some freaky old man.
Yeah, couldn't see a relation in it. And yeah, so he just tells him like the whole thing, and then says, "Oh, he did tell me one thing." He told me if any like a weird old man and a kid ask questions about it to kill him essentially.
Yeah.
And I never thought it'd be you.
Well, why would you?
Yeah. But then he pulls out a snub nose and tries to actually kill Marty.
Yeah, I don't know what to think of this, to be honest with you. I mean, you're putting some tension in. The bit on the roof is genuinely creepy when he catches up with him.
Especially when he's in a dressing gown as well. Just something about that.
He's just become a monster.
Mm. Yeah, and he's sort of like, yeah, that's it. Do me a favour, jump. It'll nice and clean, like suicide almost.
What did you think of the alternate 1985, Becca?
Yeah, it's a bit dodge, isn't it? Yeah, it's not somewhere I would like to live, really. Well, I don't know, considering to the 1985 that we had. Yeah, not a big fan, really.
What about the writing in this section of the film, though? Did you find Biff overdone, or did it work for you?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit. I just generally find Biff and Griff mental. I mean, not trying to slap labels on people or anything like that, but just like really.
They're fictional. I wouldn't sweat it.
No, definitely like worse than they were, and worse than Biff was in the first film. I think that's what makes them stand out as like really memorable movie characters. Everything about the first one was you got like Doc, Marty, and everybody else, and also Biff Tannen, definitely one of the most memorable movie bullies for sure. And Griff is pretty much more the same, but dialed up to 11 stupid, as you were saying earlier, pretty much like Bobcat Goldthwait. Yeah, this isn't really a place that I want to live. And you were saying earlier, it's basically like Pottersville, as you called it, from This Wonderful Life. It's pretty much all gone downhill. But yeah, the writing, it's okay. It's a little bit OTT. And kind of lots of more. Again, listener scenes kind of don't really advance kind of plot or character, except to make everything kind of more absurd. But it's okay. It's serviceable. A bit crazy, but yeah, it's like. I think the whole idea here is that kind of like the more and more things slip away from Marty, you have to kind of see how it kind of declines, I guess, as it gets his claws in. But it's a bit cheesy. But as I say,
I didn't do any time checks on this, and I wish I had now, because there's just a feeling in my mind that we're whipping through this at a fucking ludicrous pace. Because we've been to the future and they've gone, right, we've got to go back, we go to 1985, that's hell. He goes and finds out his dad dies, he goes back, Biff tells him the story, we have a bit of a shootout, he runs away, they jump into the car, it's now we've got to go back to 1985. And it's like, fuck, how far are we even through this film?
It's actually shorter than the first one as well.
It is a little, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like, this is whipping along too fast. So it's never boring, but yeah, they cram way too much in.
I guess they just kind of really want to get to, 1985 to kind of this.
Because that's the bit that's given them their mojo. I've seen the 67 script and it's okay, but the script for this, they've gone, oh, we found we could go back into the events of the last film. That's the bit that excites them.
And I think that's the best part of the film as well.
Oh, I agree,
yeah,
by a long distance.
It's when the film kind of starts to actually pick up, even though it is only literally the last third of the film, about half an hour even, or something like that. So. Oh yeah,
it won't take us that long to get through it at all, because it's all the scenes we talked about last week, sort of looked at from a slightly different angle. We see a few new things, like we see Lorraine go to pick a dress up.
Yeah.
And it was kind of nice to see 50s era Leah Thompson again, or 50s era Lorraine Baines anyway.
But we see Biff literally being almost like aggressively kind of like...
The one line that didn't ring true there, and of course we know that he just did in the concepts of this film, but he shouts, "One day you'll be my wife," and I'm just thinking... What? That does not ring true from that character.
That sounds a bit weird, doesn't it? That's a very odd line of dialogue.
I don't know, maybe I bought, maybe it's just because I'm taking the history of the films with me as I watch it. But Biff always did have like a liking for Lorraine. Like,
he did.
He always
I've got likings for lots of people, and crushes on, I've had crushes in the past, certainly, and it doesn't lead from that to my wife.
But he never seemed to have eyes for anyone else, particularly. I don't remember him sort of like.
No, that's true. It was all focused on her.
Yeah.
Okay. One thing, and I can't remember if it's a deleted scene or not, or whether it's in the film. He's arguing about the cost of his car, isn't he?
Yeah.
The $300. The guy he's arguing with is called Terry, and 60 years later, he's the Save the Top Clock Tower guy.
Yeah.
The old guy
Yeah.
where the old guy in old age makeup, which I always wondered why he was in old age makeup, and he's waving the Save the Clock Tower. You know, that is the guy who fixed
Oh, the other flyer, yeah.
Biff's car.
And they still not fixed it in the future. For all that technology, no one's fixed a fucking clock.
Well, but
Yeah,
it,
they're
but
just
it-
still broken as well.
But it's part of Hill Valley history, and it's just don't knock it down.
Yeah.
Why you'd have to save that with money, I don't know. You'd think these things would be listed.
You think the council
again-
would sort it out?
Well, you know, you see buildings that are of any sort of historical value, and they get listed. You don't have to keep raising money to save them, unless
No,
they're
I don't
unless
know
they're in
how-
danger
I
of
don't know how it
falling
works
down,
in
of course,
America.
which is different. But yeah, okay, all right, fair enough. They go looking for Biff because they've got to get this almanac back.
Yeah.
We actually see him get it from his.
The Bond, let us know.
Yeah, I don't care. Let's be honest.
I do. I'm quite interested.
Yeah.
I'm sure there is a way to do it.
We see old Biff like sort of. I mean, we both get Marty and old Biff like looking at Biff. What struck me as a bit weird, or I don't know if it's like a different camera beat because he's older now. He kind of reminisces. He's like, manure. I remember that.
I remember that. I think
Yeah.
it's the fact that all of our memories are recreations. Always, you know, when you remember something, it's kind of you almost recreating it in your head.
Yeah.
To actually be there with the sights, smell, sounds, people, and everything like that on the day, it just must feel incredible. 60 years later, it isn't 60 years later because he's gone back in time, but he's 60 years removed from it.
Mm.
So I've never read it as any more than that. That you would go, oh wow, look what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I would get that. It's okay.
It just strikes me a little funny how he goes like, oh yeah, that time I was publicly humiliated and covered in shit. You know?
I guess.
Ah, memories.
But he's about to change the kid's life, isn't he?
Yeah.
So I guess it's okay. I've always liked Biff's car. It's really cool. I wouldn't want one necessarily, but I love those old 50s cars. They look really cool.
That was a really cool car, to be honest. I do like it a lot.
This film is very fond of its data dumps. So we get the whole point of the almanac, what it can do, explained with a timely example on the radio.
Yeah. Not that actually we the audience need to hear, but I guess it needs to be explained to Biff why he would believe it. You know, like, why would he be like, you fucking crazy old man? Why would I fucking...
Yeah, as much as you think, well, we don't need to know as an audience, so why do we need Biff to be told? It is rather fantastical as a concept, so I think we kind of need to see Biff get it. Yeah, I think we do need to see it.
Because he is that dumb and that belligerent, he would probably be that, he would go piss
He
off
would
old man.
chuck it away, which he kind of almost does a couple of times.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of all right with this, but we have it all explained. He's now convinced, and Marty is locked in his garage.
I loved how it almost keeps coming in possession of Marty. Like he throws it at the back, and it's like literally like Marty can easily just grab it, and then
Yeah.
Okay, so but then old Biff just grabs it back and say, "No, you have to keep it safe and locked away." You know, so little things like that really, I think, kind of really work for this film. But yeah, Marty's basically locked in the shed now.
The best bit about this is where he's told to dress inconspicuously, and he rolls up in like
A leather jacket.
leather jackets in an era where, I mean, bear in mind, I know it's a few years later, but when Happy Days came along, which is set in the 50s,
Yeah.
the Fonz didn't wear a leather jacket for the first series. Because
They
it was
didn't,
too...
really?
Yeah, because leather jackets seemed to be like, you know, what troublemakers wore.
Yeah.
So in the 50s, him rolling up in all leathers like that would stand out, particularly as it's
Really
summer.
shocking.
Actually, it's not. It's November. I'm wrong on that. But it's a nice day as well. And so, yeah.
It would look a bit weird.
Doesn't quite work, but it's nice as a little visual joke. And he's trying to stay in touch with Doc, and Doc's, yeah,
He looks a little bit I Spy, doesn't he?
yeah,
does look a bit.
definitely, yeah, he does.
Yeah. So
So then what? He basically has to wait in the car until Biff comes out that evening to go
Yeah.
off to the dance.
Well, he waits for Doc to come and save him, but Biff is basically goes to dance before Doc can come.
That's right.
So
Because he turns up on a bike or something. It's like, well, I don't know, what was he going to do? Give Marty a fucking crossbar? I'd never thought of that before. It's like, what's that? Okay.
And also I just wondered, like, well, what's Doc been? Is the other problem with the film, like, the amount of times Doc's not around, he's just like, oh, I'm doing stuff. Never explains what stuff he's actually doing.
Yeah, I know.
Think, well,
I nearly asked a minute ago, and then I realised the film hadn't really thought about it. I nearly said to you, what's Doc doing all this time? And then I thought, no, the film's not thought about it, so Chris won't know because there isn't an answer.
No, there's not.
So he's just trying to get this book. They head off to the dance, and he's basically in the car while it all happens, isn't he?
Yeah.
Nearly grabs it a couple of times, but Biff puts the radio on and picks the book up and sees it working. Not a lot of sport happened in the second half of the 20th century, judging by the thickness of this pamphlet.
Yeah.
Yeah, there seems to be like one every hour. Go, oh, yeah.
Yeah, whenever you put the radio on, sport's happening, but it's all in a book that, honestly, you've seen thicker Mr. Men books, I think.
Yeah, it's not a very big almanac, is it?
No, it's not. But anyway, it works for the plot. It's okay. You can't have it as a big fucking tome, I don't suppose. But yeah.
Yeah, maybe it was just like all nicely one line sort of date.
So then the key thing is watching the dance, isn't it, from a different perspective? Like Marty passes by the car, the other version of him is in with Jennifer. Not Jennifer. Yeah, it is not Jennifer, Lorraine. And, you know, and she says to him, when I've got kids, they'll be able to do what we want. And you hear him say, can I get that in writing? And he agrees with himself and things like that. Not fantastic jokes, but just a nice idea of being, you know, in the same space, but doing something different.
Yeah, like going back on yourself almost. It's kind of...
And he can't interrupt it. He cannot interrupt it because he has to be able to play Johnny Be Good and all the rest of it. And
also, you know, see like other aspects like or what Strickland was doing and Biff being where Biff was where in other parts, you know, like before we got to the car bit and after that. So we see him like sort of like we see him like slipping like booze in the punch, you know, and stuff like that. So it's nice to like have a few little add-ons for in depth.
I have to say I did like the ooh la la joke as well.
Oh, what? Oh, yeah.
Well, it's covered in the almanac sleeve, but they're all passing around very, very, very soft porn, basically. That's kind of funny because Marty eventually gets his hands on it, and it's like ooh la la.
Yeah, it's kind of believable then, isn't it? Because you just think like, well, he would think, oh, I don't know, if I take the sleeve off, and I can pass this like dirty mag around to the lads.
Yeah.
Inconspicuous. He finds out the mag is not there. Then he's like panicking, like.
So Biff's got it, and he's thinking, well, where the hell how do I find Biff? Yeah. And then he remembers where they are and what's about to happen.
Yeah.
Hey, you get your damn hands off her, we hear.
And then he gets punched out again, which is just as satisfying as it was when we watched the last film. Yeah,
Jeffrey Wiseman played, obviously there's lots of inserts of Crispin Glover, and we'll talk about that after Fun Facts, but Jeffrey Wiseman replaced him, and physically he doesn't look like him. Physically he's too slight and everything, so they do quite a lot to hide him. Vocally he sounds a lot like him though. Vocally it's not a bad impression when they have to redo dialogue and stuff. But yeah, he steals it. He steals it from the knocked out Biff's pocket, and then you got that guy with, I think he stole his wallet. And the goons go after him to try to get it back. But of course, they see him on stage, so they think that's the same guy.
Yeah.
So that puts that at risk. They nearly knock him out, that version out, before he can go back to the future. And it's just hugely convoluted, because I feel like I should be explaining this a lot more for anyone who's not seen it. But actually, the chances are, A, you have seen it, and B, it's not really that important. The film is massively overcomplicating this.
Yeah, but it's nice to sort of like have the difference. But we sort of never think like those guys are, and they're actually just by the stage waiting to beat the crap out of him.
And of course, they weren't there the whole time because this is like a rerun of the thing, but they could have been because the original Marty never saw them, and we were following the original. Marty. Yeah. So this could have all happened in the original version of Back to the Future, and we still wouldn't have seen it.
The only thing different is that he noticed them coming off stage. He's like, that's weird. But that's it. That's the only real difference, really.
Yeah, but even that, he wouldn't have remembered it 2 minutes later. It was just somebody went, oh, right, and then just carried on.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is all right. Obviously, because you don't have the same swell of the orchestral bits from Alan Silvestri behind Earth Angel, it sounds nowhere near as impressive this time. But they did get the same band back and everything. That was cool.
Yeah, Marvin Gaye's cousin's band. So then we sort of meet Biff outside because Marty takes his time by observing his interaction with his parents. He goes, oh, I remember that, even though you kind of like, well, time is of the essence, you want to get out of there. You got the Alamac, but then he bumps into Biff. And Biff challenges him to a fight, and he says no thanks, and he calls him a chicken.
It's just like, oh god, that wasn't a good point. So every time they re-hit it, it's like a bum note. It's like, really the song's playing and then suddenly you hear, and it's like, oh god, every time we hear this chicken thing, I don't like it.
I mean, partly because you don't like it, you like Marty too much for him to do it. It's like, oh, Marty, don't do that. Oh, do you know what I mean? There's a little bit of that makes you think, oh, fucking Marty, don't be this fucking stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, you've done what you needed to do.
Yeah.
And he's actually got the book on him.
Yeah.
That's the thing at this point.
You think, you think in that situation, you would think, I'm not fucking taking any chances. That would no, this is a risky situation to be in. I got what I need. I'm just gonna get the fuck out of here as soon as I can. But no, he sort of goes nobody cutting and gets himself knocked out by himself. Funnily enough.
Yeah, I mean, if he literally walked away, he was home free.
Yeah.
The moment that door hits him in the face and he falls over and reveals that there's a book inside his jacket. Yeah, really, really stupid.
And then he has to go, I've lost the book again. And he's like, oh, okay. Well, then we have a chase with. They have a chase with Biff where he gets on the hoverboard and
he drops him down with him, and he said, "Can't we just land the thing on him and cripple his car?" And it's like, no, that's a 1950 whatever car it is. It's solid. It'll destroy us. So he drops him down on a hoverboard.
Yeah, and they have the sequence where he tries to sort of sneak the car, and then they kind of have a in-car fight almost while trying to get the Almac. And I like the sequence. It's it's well handled enough. It almost kind of redoes the mirror a bit as well. So
where do we go from here?
Yeah, we're really selling this film, aren't we?
Yeah, really. I feel bad because people on our Twitter, for example, it was what's his name?
Simon Hunter.
Simon, that was it. I was going to call him Simon, but that's the editor of Geek. Sometimes this is my favourite film ever, and I'm like, we need to, not be so down, not be so negative.
Why? But we're not a fucking jukebox. Put the money in and we'll play the tune you want. It's like Simon will understand. We've been fair in what we're saying. Sure. The only thing that's been unfair, if you like, from my perspective, is I enjoy it more than it's coming across.
Oh, sure.
Everything I'm saying is true to my mind. I'm being very critical of this with bloody good reason, but it's an ingenious idea, and I always enjoy Back to the Future too. So if there's one thing that isn't coming across correctly, it's my level of enjoyment to this film. But yeah, it's a mess. It's an utter mess.
I do. I mean, the thing is, though, if you'd asked me at some point, this would have been in contention to being my favourite.
It was my favourite for a good period of time.
But and largely it was because of the last bit as well. It was I thought it was really, really kind of enjoyable stuff. And I know, and it's not like terrible. I say it's not terrible. It's definitely watchable. You know, it's like it's certainly better than well, it's certainly better than like most bad films. I mean, there are definitely worse films that are just like
that's underselling it because
yeah.
How many sequels just fire up and do another adventure and that's it? They've put some real thought into this. If anything, they've got almost too inspired with it and piled another thing in and, we can do this and then we can do that and then we can do this.
It's like what you say, like they tried something new.
I like that, and I'm really glad Back to the Future exists. And I think, bizarrely, I still think I like it more than 3. And we will test that because I haven't watched 3. I'm not ready for I've done all the prep for 3 except watch the film itself, if you like. So, although I've seen a lot of it in the background because I've listened to commentaries and things like that, I'm yet to watch it properly. I think 3 is a better film that I enjoy less. But this is ingenious. I mean, this is better than 99% of sequels. It just is. But you can see that the writing is, far too many data dumps, far too many scenes that I'm not sure they were committing to because they were having to undo ideas that they'd set up in the first film. And yeah, just hugely overstuffed. And I think the first few times you see this film, it almost blows you away with its sheer scale that you go, fuck, now they're going there, and then they're going there, and now 1985 has changed because of this, and that's all wildly impressive. Now when I sit and watch it, it's really overstuffed. I mean, the alternate 1985 would have made a good bulk of a film quite easily, but it's a whistle-stop tour to give us the information we need, and then they move on. It's overstuffed.
They do try to pack a lot in. I mean, you said earlier, it's like, it's amazing how much they pack in, but then also, oh my god, it's amazing how much they pack in. I think here, it really does start to get a bit saggy and baggy for me. They do try to cram a lot of information and just can't even speak. We're all having trouble speaking this evening. Very sorry. They tried to pack a lot in a short space of time, which for me doesn't really help things along at all, sadly. But still, I'm still with them. I'm still here at this point in the film. I'm still ready to go with them on the journey. So, where do we go from here?
Well, I mean, the gist is this: Biff smashes the shit out of his car trying to, crush Marty against walls and things like that.
Yeah. The
gist is he gets hold of the almanac and then he finds himself in the middle of the tunnel with just his hoverboard and Biff ready to drive at him. To cut long story short, Doc has some bunting that he hangs down from the car, pulls Marty to safety. They go off ready to sort of go back to the time they're supposed to be in. He sets fire to the almanac. He's picked up a little sort of box of matches or a little pack of matches that he picked up from the casino or the hotel, but from alternate 1985.
From Biff.
And it changes back to auto detailing, which is what we see Biff do. He cleans cars and things like that. So we're told as an audience they have reshaped the future back to what it should be. But there have been little dropped bits, and they're still pretty good at this, the sort of setup and payoff. That there have been problems with the time circuits that have been dropped a couple of times through the film. And actually, if you watched, it did flash up 1885, but it's something you wouldn't necessarily pay much attention to, as Marty's waiting for Doc to pull over, because he hasn't at any point been in the car. He's been carried away on that bunting. So again, they thought about that in the writing, that why is he not in the car already? And he's hit by lightning, and the car just disappears. And instead of the fire trails being behind you, it becomes like a little circle, because he's basically spun on the spot. And then it starts to rain, bang on cue, and the guy pulls up from Western Union with a letter they've been holding for 70 years.
Yeah, can you imagine that being like really? I do like detail how there was like, it was very much like a mystery to them. I was like, this is a really random request. They had a bet going on, see if that actually was going to be a Marty McFly here.
I mean, you'd be one extreme or the other, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
That you'd either go, we don't even need to turn up, this is fucking bollocks, or you'd be almost like fighting to be the person who took it because it's so intriguing.
Yeah.
You'd just be, I'll go. I don't care what time of night it is. I want to see what the hell's going to be there. I can't imagine there'll be anything, but I've got to see it with my own eyes.
Yeah.
I've got something for you, and of course you think he's going to pull out a gun or something.
Which is weird because he's nowhere near. Like he's far too close to be pulling out a gun.
I know. But yeah, it's a letter from Doc from 1885. So he's now in the Old West, and he's been living there for 7 months, I think he says. Something like 9 months, one of the two. And he's working as a blacksmith. And that's it. He's in the Old West. He's alive, but he's in the Old West. And I only know one man who can save him. And of course, now it just adds to this overstuffed feel that he has to run back into the town, which is a mile or two away. On the timeline, this wouldn't work, actually, because when you think Earth Angel, he was already running late. But anyway, he gets back into the town just in time for him to be sent back to the future, like a week ago or whatever it was. The week ago version of him.
Like a day or so ago.
Yeah. And Doc, he runs around the corner, Doc panics, and he says, I just sent you back to the future. No, I know, but I'm back. I'm back from the future. Great Scott, he collapses, to be concluded. Comes up on the screen, which is lovely.
That's quite a busy day or so for Marty, isn't it?
I know. So he has some fucking sleep.
There's a lot on his plate that day.
The to be continued that's at the end of the first film was only stuck on like home releases and that. So this isn't to be concluded was there though. I do remember that. And then of course we get the trailer for the third film, and the only difference on home releases is it said in the cinema coming summer 1990. And of course it doesn't say that on the home releases now. But it was just
It doesn't mind. I'm sure it said that on mine.
Maybe. I don't
remember this. I think I was like 5 or something when it came out. And obviously I think I saw one of the anniversary DVDs perhaps. And then again on Blu-ray.
It came out December 2002 on DVD. I remember that because I was so fucking excited it was coming out on DVD.
Yeah, I think maybe that was like the first purchase I made. So
the film, the home release, doesn't have that on the end. I'm not saying there isn't an edition somewhere, but it would have to be a different transfer, because why would they suddenly have it on one rogue edition? Whether it was ever on the video, I don't know. Could have been. But yeah, so, and it just added to this overstuffed feeling. I mean, it was exciting at the time. I was like, fuck, we got another one, and it's only in like 6 months. Because obviously in this country, we got the second one later, and we got the third one at the same time as America, roughly. But it was just like, Christ, we've just been dumped with all this information. Literally seconds ago, it's like, he's in the Old West. And before we got time to take that in, he's pegging it towards the fucking town centre. And then we see the first film's bit again, and then Doc collapsing, and then suddenly we got a trailer for another film. It's like, fucking slow down.
Take a breath.
It's not that I can't keep up. I can keep up just fine. But it's like, yeah. It's too much.
Yeah, it was. But you know what? As you said, there are much worse sequels than this, and it is enjoyable. It has some nice ideas. So, you know, it is what it is. I mean, I was kind of disappointed with the quality, but at the same time, I can't say I hate this film. I can't say I didn't enjoy my time with it either. So,
it's also got both of these films, this and next week's, has a much brighter colour palette than the first one. It must be different film stock or something, and it looks a lot more cartoonish as a result. I mean, the one thing, Bob Zemeckis says it's the most interesting film he's ever made, and I think there's something in that. Although he says the impact of a sequel's never the same. I think there's some truth in that. That's less so as years go by and we get more of them. But he also said that he really regrets it because when they made the second film, and then they took 2 weeks off and started principal photography on the third. So as much as it's filmed at the same time, no, it isn't. They're consecutive, and there is a slight gap, but it's only a couple of weeks. But then you've got Bob Zemeckis up in, I think it's Northern California somewhere, filming the third one. And you've got Bob Gale down at Universal Studios supervising the editing and sound mixing of the second film. And you've got Bob Zemeckis flying down there at the end of a day's filming, watching the rushes and all the rest of it, or watching the editing they've done on the second film, and then flying back. And I think he spread himself a bit too thin, and he says that he wished he'd taken a little bit longer and put a bit more time to the second one, which is a very polite way. And they've got to be careful on these extras, because any film out there, even Batman and Robin, someone who buys it, it's one of their favourites. It just by the law of averages. So they can't sit there and go,
Oh,
it's
shit.
But I think Bob Zemeckis likes this film in that he says it's one of the most interesting thing he's done. But I also think he's disappointed a bit with the end result.
Yeah,
because he talks about how he wishes he was there to supervise a bit more, and he was off filming the third one.
That probably will show, actually, to a certain degree.
So yeah, my final thought is that this is probably one of the most unrepresentative reviews I've ever given, because everything I've said, I believe I agree with. But at the outset of this, it was like, oh, I can't wait to review the second one and stuff, because there's so much in it. And it wasn't from a place of, I'm going to be really negative. But as you sit and look at the film and start making value judgments on different parts of it, it is a mess, and it's overstuffed, and the exposition in the first film was so cleverly put across, and it's data dumps in this film. You know, the whole point of every generation physically looks exactly the same is something that came along with the second film. We forget it and almost retrofit it onto the first film. No, his parents didn't look like him, and his brother and sister didn't look exactly like his parents, and they didn't play them with the same actors and stuff. The most cartoonish bit of the first film was that Doc didn't age 30 years in 30 years. He didn't. He aged a little bit of dryness they put on the skin with makeup to, tighten and cause some wrinkles, means that really, in reality, he probably aged about somewhere between 5 and 10, really. So much so that you can't see it, except in the highest of high definition. So you've got a film that's up there with It's a Wonderful Life and any other really heartwarming classic you can think of. And it's followed by this sort of Frankenstein's monster that they needed to focus on one or two things. It's almost like they had a debate over 4 or 5 different script ideas, and all of them won. Instead of saying let's just do the future. I can understand why they didn't stay in the future, by the way, and I think that's wise. But instead of picking up later rather than right after the first one and just making out there was some interim adventure, they've gone straight to the future, and instead of sticking with that or getting themselves back to 1985 and it being sort of a mystery to try and figure out what they need, how to do it. They've done the future, they've done 1985, they've done 1955, but they've also hinted at 1885, and it's all too much. And I think given that they painted themselves into a corner with the end of the first one, I can see how it is what it is. If you look at the trilogy almost as like one long film, doesn't play quite so badly, but if you focus on Back to the Future for an extended period of time, only think about that film, suddenly when you put this one on, it's really cartoonish, and that whole chicken thing the film could have done without entirely. There are several ways a man can fuck. There's several ways a man can organically fuck his life up with the wrong decisions. Trust me, I know. It doesn't require you to retrofit some emergency fucking character trait on in order to have him screw it up at 17. Anything could have happened between 17 and 47. So I don't like that. But I'm representative in that I really like this film, and I don't think that's come across tonight at all. But that's all I've got to say on it.
It's I guess it's as you say, in terms of critically, if you're going to examine what the film is a mess, and you can sort of tear it to shreds. But then sometimes you see a film that is technically bad, but you enjoy it for whatever good points it has, and maybe just sometimes there's just bad films that you just go, I don't know why, but I just enjoy it. So maybe there's elements of that. Maybe because it's part of a franchise that you like as well. It's still tied to a film that you love. Or that we love, really, that that has some resonance as well. So by association, you enjoy it more if this was done on its own. So yeah, I mean, I don't hate the film. In fact, at one point, it was probably considered my favourite. But I just think that there are in terms of script. And when we look at the first one, it was so sharp and so on point. This feels kind of very much like rushed and kind of just not very well thought through, and just almost like a that'll do kind of mentality. But having said that, there's also a why not mentality, which, as Dave rightly says, is worthwhile. So yeah, very very mixed bag, but you can't hate it though, can you?
I don't know. Can you, Becca?
No. No, I'd say the same. But there are times when the first film is, as we said, as I said, one of the best films ever made, and that's kind of up there with Citizen Kane, Lawrence of Arabia, Seventh Seal, all the great classics. And this film just shies ever so slightly away from that a little bit. Again, there's a lot on its plate. It's trying a lot to manage. You've got a lot of concurrent timelines going back and forth. Anyway, it's all a little bit too much. Sometimes it does get a little bit too much. There is a lot of retconning involved. I think this is kind of like Back to the Future, the retcon, if it had a subtitle, apart from part 2. But again, brilliant performances all around. Makeup, okay, costumes are amazing, and how they predict 2015. Obviously, as you said earlier, they can be quite, go broad, but very scientific, or just really silly, and they just go really silly, which is good fun. It's quite interesting to see what's happened and what hasn't, and also the alternate version of 2015, which, as you say, become Pottersville. But again, yeah, it just tries to have too much on its plate. I mean, some parts of it I enjoy, some parts of it I do really struggle with. So whereas, for example, I think I would rate the first film like 5 out of 5, and this film I'd probably be middling 3. Unfortunately, I mean, next week when it does venture into the westerns, I haven't seen that film for a long time, but I do remember the first time I saw it. In all the westerns? In all the westerns, yes. I did kind of really struggle with it. Nothing to do with the western setting, but it was just I was just a little bit. Well, perhaps it was everything to do with the western setting. I don't know. We'll find out when I revisit it. But it was just I really did struggle, and I just had this pervading memory of it being my least favourite in the small series.
It's always been my least favourite, the third one, and I don't want to talk too much about
Difficult
3
third film.
But it's always been my least favourite. But I'm kind of itching to get to it after tonight, because I've watched Back to the Future 2 in a very different way tonight. Well, not tonight, it was a few nights ago, but I watched it with a very critical eye, which is what we're here to do. But unfortunately, when you start trying to piece this film together and think about different things, and actually think critically about what you think about different things in this scene, it becomes a right fucking mind blower. It's really like, this is too much. They've really overdone this bit, and I don't like that bit, and so on. The relative simplicity to 3 now appeals to me as something that's coming to us.
Yeah, it just feels more akin to the first, even though it is.
Yeah.
Like, it does just feel
I'm
much more Western.
More as a result of being less favourable to this one tonight than I was expecting.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, I still still enjoy it. It's a fun ride, and it's fun seeing how they fit all pieces together, how they go back, especially with the almanac, for example. Things about Biff's car, and a bit like where they spike the punch, and that's kind of where his kind of moxie and everything comes from, which I think is quite interesting. But it just tries to juggle too much. Like for me, it does struggle a little bit with that. And some of the set pieces are amazing, like the 2 types of fashions, or the hover cars. But just the vision of the future is incredible. But yeah, just in terms of they try to pack so much into the plot, it really does just become quite baggy and saggy, as I've said before.
I do think it suffers also from like the Empire Strikes Back analogy. It's
the no finish.
Yeah, I mean, it does. To be fair, it does have an actual arc that starts and finishes with the almanac. The fact that it's a continuation story kind of does make it feel like a little bit incomplete, because Marty isn't still kind of like stuck in 1955 again, so which kind of gets sorted out pretty soon next week. So
Yeah.
So moving on to sort of fun facts with this, Becca, can we start with you had a fact about Crispin Glover, and I've been itching to talk about this. So can we start with that particular fact, please?
Yeah, as we know, he doesn't appear in the film. He is not appearing in this movie. No, I think it's interesting. Obviously,
Nice that you got knighted then. Go on,
Sir
sorry.
Crispin Glover generally. I think he should get an honorary knighthood. Well, he does. He lives in a castle now, so no reason why he shouldn't.
Of course he does. He's Crispin Glover.
No, he does. Yeah, it's like in Hungary or somewhere like that. Might not be Hungary. Might be like Romania. Somewhere within Central or Eastern Europe. He lives in a castle, which I think is amazing.
how's he managed that? I mean, he's not been in that many films.
No, it's actually done like maybe property investment. But no, he kind of he bought this dilapidated castle and has basically been restoring it, and that's probably why we've not seen him in that many films. But yeah, anyway, no, I was just going through the stuff on IMDb.com. I just think, I mean, and he says only 213 and 217 found this interesting, but I think it's interesting. So I'll just read this out. Crispin Glover sued the filmmakers as they had not been granted permission to use his likeness in Part 2. Crispin's suit named John Doe 1 to 100 as defendants, where he would not have to name all of the individuals he was suing. Crispin ended up dropping the lawsuit after the case was settled out of court for $265,000 by Universal's insurance company, who decided it would be cheaper to pay Crispin rather than to actually go to trial. The Screen Actors Guild subsequently introduced new rules about illicit use of actors. I think that's interesting that they actually changed the law. It always annoys me, how things like that, it takes something like that for actually laws to change, but I think that's interesting how things like that influence the law and practice of how it's done. I just find it quite interesting.
What interests me about it is that we get a very one-sided version of this story. Not that it might be completely true. I'm not saying anyone's lying, but obviously I've heard Bob Gale talking about it. Well, Bob Gale's on the side of the screen. Bob talks about how demanding Crispin and his agent were to come back. Fair enough. Okay, let's just say. So we're told a story how Crispin didn't end up coming back, and it's made to sound very much like his agent's fault, if you like. But we also hear stories about some of the bizarre ideas he had on the first film. But that aside, he gave a really great and memorable performance. He's a key part of why Back to the Future works. He really is. And the sequels do miss him. And I'd rather have, the George McFly character than Michael J. Fox plays every fucking body. And the fact is, they couldn't come to an agreement with him, and then just started like reusing shots of him, bits of dialogue with him, and then dressing someone up to sort of kind of pass for being him, without any new contractual arrangement, and that doesn't strike me as fair. I can see, from my limited understanding, why Crispin Glover sought legal action off this. So yeah, but obviously in the end film we end up with Jeffrey Wiseman, who is shot very sparingly.
Yeah, you kind of see him from behind or
because they wanted
through a mirror or something like that.
You don't need George in this film.
No.
It's
a bit kind of surface to requirement.
It has to be the night that like Lorraine and George are going round to like Marty's for dinner. You think, well, it didn't need to be. They didn't even need to be in it. And when you have them outside at the end of the film, they don't really need to be there either. No. I'm a little uncomfortable with all of this, and I can see why he sued. But anyway, what other facts can you lay on us?
I feel a bit bad for saying they tried to pack so much in, but Carl Sagan,
why they did,
the legend that is Carl Sagan, considered this, apparently according to IMDb.com, considered this to be the greatest time travel film ever made, due to its accuracy and handling multiple timelines. I just find that mind-boggling. Because I think Carl Sagan is like one of my all-time favourite sci-fi authors. Like, what?
Yeah, but like I said, but he's a scientist. And
exactly.
He's not a script writer.
No, he's not a film critic.
If he,
I don't disagree with them. I just sort of, I think that fact is amazing, really amazing. And I just have to align my brain with Carl Sagan. But yeah, no, I think that was pretty cool. I mean, having somebody, you know, high up like that is like, oh, super cool.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just, you know, if he's a scientist, it's kind of like, well, it's not really his. The ideas behind the film are his field, but like the quality
definitely.
of the script writing isn't.
No,
You might as well
I
get
think it's
script
all about
writing
how
advice
the-
from Wayne Rooney. It's like it's not what you fucking do, is it?
Well, it's like Bob Zemeckis giving advice on how to play football, you know. Yeah, so other fun facts involve, obviously as we mentioned, the ledge on the clock tower broken by a dock in 1985 is still broken in 2015, and it's probably still broken now in 2017. Let's have a look what else, blah, blah, blah. Oh yeah, October 21st, 2015, multiple cinemas in the US and maybe in the UK as well screened this film, as obviously it's the first date that Doc, Marty and Jennifer head back to the future. Anyway, the last fun fact about this film is, yeah, as I kind of mentioned earlier, this film really does use every trick in the book. It's quite advanced in its use of visual trickery. So like 1980, well, the late 80s, early 90s, you had like CG just kind of coming in, just starting to be used. Obviously, it would be a good few years before Toy Story would come out, the first fully CGI film. It was 94, 95, I think. And you can see some earlier Pixar shorts coming out literally just towards...
Sorry, what were you saying was 94, 95?
Toy Story.
Toy Story was 95 in America, like
Okay.
November or
So it might be
something.
96 over here then, perhaps.
Yes, it was.
My first memory of that was actually watching that across 2 CDs that my dad had made.
Mhm.
I won't ask how he made it. I think he probably imported it from America or something like that, I think. But no, that has the accolade of being the first fully CGI film. Yeah, so there's kind of like a special effect created by ILM called VistaGlide. And it kind of uses the effect of having the same actor interacting with themselves as we've seen.
Yeah, it's got elements of like motion control to it, doesn't it?
It is,
And stuff
yeah,
like
very
that,
much motion
that-
control. Very
that
much.
It
It
is
does look a little
multiple
bit.
passes and everything in the same place, and then you keep getting the same actor interacting with the same environment.
You have,
and then,
you
of
have
course,
got
you
that
just put it
annoying
together.
little line between the scene, like you would, typically of that day. But I just think it's amazing that these effects it's created specifically for this film, and this film has actually helped advances in cinematography along, which I think is a very fun fact.
That's fun, folks.
That's so fun. I've just creamed my pants.
Actually, he creamed his pants 2 years ago and created an alternate 2
Created
days
an alternate Western.
where he's got crusty pants.
Ugh,
Yeah, I still haven't washed them.
disgusting. Better than Krusty the Clown. Ugh.
Maybe that's why he was called Krusty.
Maybe.
Hey, folks.
Hey.
Hey.
You can find me at Cinematronics on Twitter. You can find this podcast at cinematronics.co.uk.
You can find me at the Pasty Kid 1976 on Twitter.
And you can find us on Twitter at Expect Us to Talk, on Facebook.com Expect Us to Talk, and you can also hit us up on YouTube, search for Do You Expect Us to Talk, and also on Stitcher and iTunes. If you go onto iTunes and type in Do You Expect Us to Talk in the search engine, in the search box,
You'll find a YouTube clip of Sean Connery tied to a table saying, "Do you expect me to talk?"
no, Mr. Bond.
Yeah.
But literally, if you do go into YouTube,
At least we
"Do you
haven't used
expect us
that in
to
any of
talk?"
our podcasts.
No, not ever, no, never. But yeah, so iTunes and Stitchers and all the lovely ways that you can listen to us in your ear holes. Which I think that's it, isn't it? Got it all covered. Yeah, besides we're not on Pinterest or Vine. Well, not Vine, but
Fine. Can you imagine just doing a 4.5 second podcast just to get into
all the
Vine's
technology that
disappeared
doesn't
now.
exist anymore.
I was gonna say, like, isn't Vine's not around anymore, is it?
Yeah, Vine's not a thing anymore, is it? So
It was fucking tenuous in the first place, if you ask me.
it really was. I didn't latch onto it, to be honest. I was like, no. So
I don't have a problem with it. It's just the whole idea. It just felt like it's come up with something that's vaguely innovative somehow.
yeah, innovative somehow.
It's like I think the whole thing of it's like, quick, be funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you have such a limited time span, isn't it? So
They used it pretty well in Chef, that John Favreau film. But yeah.
oh no, yeah, that was good fun. God, don't watch that film on an empty stomach. Oh my god.
Yeah. I love that film. Not everyone does, but I loved it.
No, it's nice. It's very colourful, but it does kind of make you want to just eat the biggest meal ever.
Yeah, it does.
It's really nice though. But
I
no,
went to see Chef at the cinema because my friend was really keen to see it.
yeah.
So
Was your friend a chef?
No,
Oh.
it doesn't follow, you know. But anyway,
fair enough.
sorry. But we turn up at the cinema, and he was going, I'm a bit worried we're going to be hungry during this, you know, because they're going to be cooking all this fine food. So he turns up with like a packet of Skittles or something, and I'm thinking, well, it's not really the same fucking thing, is it? He was like, well, that should help, and I'm like, well, if he's preparing Skittles, then that's fine. If he's preparing some duck dish, I don't think Skittles are going to help. But fair enough. Anyway,
He ends up just making like sandwiches, though, doesn't he?
possibly, yeah, he does really, doesn't he?
It depends if you follow the code or not. This is it.
Anyhow, we'll be heading to the Old West next, which means Becca.
Do you expect us to talk or return with Back to the Future Part 3?